7:01. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Continue. Thank you all. Thank you for our visitors and guests and for Susan, our observer from the select board. I would like to do a couple of little announcements before we actually begin. Well, number one, I think in order to get the meeting started, I do need to take a verbal roll call from the members of the Historical Commission. So Melissa Saulfield, am here. Please speak up. Rebecca?
Bogosian, here.
Michael Capizzi here.
Rebecca Lemaitre here.
Robert, you're muted. Does it count? I know he's here. I can see him.
Got it. Tom Beardsley here.
Hi, Tom. Okay, thank you.
Hi.
And Bob, should I unmute him or can you unmute him? Heather?
I can ask him to unmute.
Bob, would you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, you have to announce that you're here.
I'm here.
You're okay. So thank you all. The other thing I would like to ask, as I think all of you know, Heather will be going out on maternity leave, could be anytime soon, and which means that, and congratulations,
Yay!
baby girl coming along. We women need to take power, right? That's very important. But because she is leaving, that also means that we will need to be taking our own minutes. So I am asking one of you tonight if you would take the minutes.
Well,
and
I can
no?
take minutes tonight.
Okay. So in the future, what I will ask is one of us will do it, and we'll just do it on a rotating basis so that we only probably have, one time to do this. If that's, I think that should be acceptable.
Melissa, I'm happy to. I do that role right now for the school PTG, so I'm in the habit anyway, if that's helpful.
Oh, well, thank you. So, and I've done it for years, so I have no objection to it. I just think, obviously we need to sort of fill in the gap with Heather, who has just been so incredible for all of us. And this isn't her only commission that she works for. But Heather, you say you'll do it tonight
Yeah, so I'll take the minutes tonight.
Okay.
So someone from planning division will be staffing your meetings while I'm out. They just, can't take on also taking minutes with all of my other work that they're taking on for all the boards that I staff. So they've just asked that each of my 3 committees take their own minutes while I'm out.
I think that's fine.
Heather, if we have to go look at a building that's proposed for demolition, who will go with us?
So someone from planning staff will take in that application and contact you guys and set that up.
Thank you. Any other questions for Heather before we get started? Okay, well, thank you and welcome all again. So obviously our first item on the agenda is Wright Tavern Group to present their proposal for CPC funding. I assume you're coming to us because you would like our support.
Exactly right. Thank you very much. How'd y'all like the presentation so far? So that's great. Yeah, we're very excited about something. I'm gonna switch to a slideshow. So Heather, if you can make sure that I can share my slides, I'd love to do that.
Should be able to.
Because I would like to tell you what we're doing, because I think this is very important both to you as the Historic Commission and to Concord, and it's clearly important to First Parish. And so part of what you're going to hear is an excitement about what we're doing. But then I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And then Rosalind's going to talk about the actual work that we have proposed to the CPC that we're looking for support for. Because it's very important strategically, I think, to make sure that we have the funding to take forward. If we don't get it, we'll find money someplace else, but it's because we're very committed to the mission that we're on. So let me share my slides and kind of walk through, and then it will be good for us to then open up, obviously, for some conversation and discussion about answering any kind of questions that you all might have. So can you all see the screen that says the Wright Tavern on it?
Yes.
Checking. Everybody okay on that?
Yep.
So you all probably recognize this building. It's been around for a while, Jonathan Lane, who is leading the state's celebration for the Revolution 250, when we were having a conversation with him, he actually had a very important sort of framework. He said, the Wright Tavern really is the birthplace of the American independent representative government. That we don't really know what happened, back in 1774, but something happened in the tavern that took place at the meeting house, and is important for us to understand that. So I want to share with you, I mean, you all know the history, a lot of the history, so I don't need to go through the importance of it. When we've done this similar kind of talk to other people, it's revelation to people, the importance and the significance of this building and what it really means. And in the late, as you probably also know, the late 1800s, it was bequested to First Parish for safekeeping. And we've been doing that and been maintaining the building. So it's doing pretty well. However, there's some problems, and we're going to talk about that. So it's clearly an important thing. And we're looking at a couple of dates that are evolving. As you know, it's obviously a national historical landmark, one that's very important to Concord, and is going to be involved, and the details are in the process of being worked out for the celebration that's really has already begun, which is the beginning of the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country. So First Parish, in this idea about, here we have this wonderful asset, this wonderful building that we've been basically using it for ourselves as we've been, and be taking care of it. And it's getting more significance. We decided, the First Parish, both the trustees and the select committee and the senior minister said, we need to do something different. We did a project with Wright Tavern a number of years ago that was really successful and kind of opened our eyes to the importance of it. So we formed what's called a Wright Tavern Futures Task Force. And now I am the chair of that task force. And so that's why I'm here. I'm going to tell you about this task force, what we're doing, what we're planning, and then obviously to what we're thinking about in terms of the building itself. We see our vision is to reveal Concord's Wright Tavern as a key location in the founding of our country, or to put it a slightly different way, for it to take its rightful place in the history of Concord and our country. That one of the things that I feel personally, that I don't think we have been, as First Parish, open enough to make First Parish part of the community, part of the Concord community, part of the founding of our country. And this is a chance for us to do that, because therefore our mission as a task force is to develop partnerships with organizations that will fulfill this vision. And we feel the responsibility to really bring this forward. And we've got a milestone coming up. It's not a deadline, because we very much intend for it to go beyond that. But the celebration of the first First Provincial Continental Congress in October 2024, as part of the 250 celebration. But we're not looking at just that particular date. We're looking well beyond that. So we're looking to try to take First Parish and open it up into something. Now, I'll be honest with you, exactly what that looks like, that's what we're doing. This task force is made up of 9 people from representing both the trustees and First Parish. Plus we have 5 project teams that are doing research and development in support of this vision and this mission. And so there are about 20 some odd people that are actually engaged in this initiative. So it's a big deal to First Parish, and hopefully you'll see this, because we think it's going to be a big deal for Concord. Well, our plan is that we have this task force, which is the 9 people I mentioned before, and we have these teams looking at a variety of partnerships for educations and programs, somewhat similar to what we have with the Concord Museum, but maybe it's maybe they'll be part of it, maybe they won't, maybe it'll be part of a confederation of organizations. We also have to look for funding partners, because we really can't do something that First Parish doesn't have the resources to be able to do something we're talking about. There's a lot of organizations who are interested in doing partnerships and doing programs with us. And so we want to know who they are and how can we work with them. And obviously we need to sustain the building itself. But what we're in fact needing to do is to make sure the building can in fact lead the kind of direction we're talking about. So to give you a quick overview of a 5-year plan, this year is our focus is research and exploration. So these teams are looking for educational partners, funding partners, who are the best resources we need to protect the integrity of the building. Maybe there are people out there that we don't really know about. Maybe it's people we do know about, we need to build a relationship with to really understand what it is we're going to do. Then the next year, we see ourselves, a couple of years, reaching out and forming those partnerships and actually building contractual agreements with them to take the Wright Tavern to something totally different. We see 2023 to begin times where we can implement those changes, implement the plans, whatever it might be, with a target celebration in October 11th, which is once again coinciding with the Provincial Congress, and also the celebration, obviously, for Patriots Day in 2025. Someone once told me, it says, "Why are you so much in a hurry, Tom? Because I got all this stuff going on here. You know, it's like 4 or 5 years before we really need to do anything." And I reminded them, I said, "Have you ever tried to do anything that's of a nature like this with historical buildings in Concord? I think we need to, we may not have enough time given the time we're doing, but we're committed and we're going to make things happen." So part of the thing I want to share with you about this is that we are excited about what this means and what it's going to be looking like. So what we've and Rosalind will tell more about this and go into some detail in this, because I think it's important for you all to know that, is that we've made a proposal to the Concord Preservation Commission for roughly $500,000. That's part of when we've actually priced out initially what it's going to take to rebuild the infrastructure. Now and Rosalind will talk more about this, it's not really to change the cosmetics, either externally or internally, but to do the things that are necessary for the building to sustain itself with whatever we choose to do, are going to be doing for the building in the future. We need to make a building so it is safe, it is protected, can sustain itself. And we've got a number of bids and we're looking at in terms of these projects. So we're looking for some help from the CPC to support that. Once we get that approval, then we'll also seek additional funding from other sources in Concord and beyond, with the idea that construction would start in the fall of 2021, so we're a year from now. Second thing we're doing is that, as I mentioned earlier, these teams are doing this research, and we're going to beginning to say who's out there that would serve as a model for us, whether or other organizations that are similar to us, or whose ideas and the way they structure things could be something that we could really get excited about, that this is what we could do with this building. And we've talked a little bit about it with the CPC and others that says, that could range from everything from, treat it much like the Buckley Tavern or the Monroe Tavern we have in Lexington, or other kinds of the Orchard House, sort of make it a tourist location where we do activities and reenactments or whatever. Another thing is that we think about what happened in this building in 1774, that really was the founding of our country. And so one scenario is that we could actually think of this as perhaps some center for the study of democracy, perhaps the whole forming maybe an alliance with some larger national institute that we can use the Wright Tavern and can partner with them to help us understand what our democracy means. And if you think about the importance of that time right now, what an amazing place, what a rightful place for thinking like that, or something in between all those combinations. The third thing we're doing is we're setting up a separate 503c organization that by which we can do contracts, funding, and really handling long-term governance. At this point in time, we're thinking about keeping First Parish, because we feel a sense of responsibility for the building entrusted to us. But if we need to sell it or gift it to some organization that will sustain its future, we'll do that. And I think it'll need to be approved by the congregation. But that's clearly what we're going to do. But in the meantime, we're creating a separate entity to take in funding and all that, and both funding and also important part of our governance. We call it a task force because it's going to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and that at some point in time we'll transfer our work we're doing over to some governance body that will really then take care of the future of the Wright Tavern. So let me turn over to Rosalind to tell you a little bit about our little building. What's, as we like to say, what's behind the walls?
So let me introduce myself. I'm Rosalind Romberg. I'm a trustee of First Parish Donations and also a trustee of the Wright Tavern. And in 2019, the trustees conducted or paid to have conducted the very first building inspection ever performed on the Wright Tavern. And any of you who've ever purchased a house or sold a house know that that's a pretty fundamental and useful document to have. So we bit our nails while we were waiting for the feedback. But what we found was that overall, the Wright Tavern is, in fact, an extraordinary building, and much of it is in very, very good shape. But there are things behind the walls that are not in great shape. So following that inspection report, we asked for a structural engineering report to be conducted. Both were conducted by separate firms who have extensive experience with historic buildings like King's Chapel, taverns all around New England, historic buildings, town halls, Masonic temples, churches and civic buildings all around New England. So we looked for people who had expertise with these types of buildings. And here's just a real quick overview of some of what we learned. And the first caveat to know is that in a building of this age, very few things are a surprise to discover, but everything that we learned came back to a baseline of this must be remediated if you want this building to survive, say, a hurricane or an earthquake, or if you want it to last another couple hundred years. So among the things we learned was that, for example, the rafters on the roof, original 1747, it used to look, if you see me in the screen here, the roof used to look sort of like this, and now the roof is starting to look sort of like this. There's a lot of sagging. A lot of girders are not fully attached or are cracking. Next slide, Tom. The evidence of cracking or stretching of the building and failure of some of the structural supports is, for example, here where you can see cracks where the chimney is pulling away from the wall. The photo on the right is a little harder to see, but basically the timber girders have sagged to the point where the frames around the doors are doing a version of this. Next slide. Most obvious are the attic and the basement, where there's been very little renovation done. And of course, both the basement and the attic have been used largely for storage, not for active use. So what we see is evidence of water damage, sagging or bowing, lath and plaster, bowing of the support beams inside. These are two photos of a library of closer to 200 photos of damage. Thankfully, no mold, but evidence that that floor, which currently is only used for storage, but was at one time in the life of the tavern, sleeping quarters for visitors who ate at the tavern and stayed there overnight. These are now in a serious, serious state of deterioration. These are not going to last another, 200 years. Next slide, Tom. Here are cases where repairs were made, maybe 100 years ago, maybe 150 years ago, maybe only 50 years ago, but where the repairs themselves have not worked. Framing failures, weakening of sections of framing in the attic that were put in. There was some additional framing between the ceiling of the second floor and the floor of the attic, third floor, where even those have failed now. And so cracks and bowing, like what you see in this one photograph, are evidenced all throughout the entire second floor. The ceiling everywhere looks sort of like it's going to fall down one of these days. Next one. The basement tells another story equally concerning. Floor joists in many cases are cracked, show damage, don't even have any bearings anymore. The photo on the right doesn't do justice to the surprise in the basement. One of those lally columns is floating in thin air. It's attached to the beam above, but has no base at the bottom. You can kind of knock it around. And the other one coming forward is attached to concrete on the floor, but not attached to the beam above. And that's a story throughout the entire basement. Clearly not a safe condition for long-term sustainability of the building. Next one. So we have a library now of several hundred photographs of exclusively of infrastructure issues for the building, to the point where, you know, the joke going around is that we'll, after all the estimates came in and we were looking at about $750,000, we will pour this money in. The exterior will not be affected, except that cracks around the foundation will no longer be cracks. But nobody will be able to tell that the work was done because it's not part of the visible piece. Yet it is critical that we repair these things. Our proposal to the CPC also includes upgrades to mechanical systems that are very, very far from code or very far out of date, including things like the water line to the street, which provides water to the tavern, is lead and very, very small compared to what the standard code is now, and really needs to be upgraded. We have mechanical fire suppression systems and alarm systems that are not merely out of date, but the building inspector said things like, oh dear, hopelessly out of date. Adjectives you never want to hear in a building inspection report, but which we were not all that surprised to hear. So we have applied to the CPC. We are working through the process right now, and we are hoping that you will support our application. I want to share with you that we are receiving enthusiastic letters of support from the Minuteman National Park, from the Concord Museum. We have brought on board as a consultant, sorry, Tom?
The Historic District Commission.
The Historic District Commission, which we met with last week, and they voted unanimously to support this application. We've also brought on board Stephen Mallory, who was the co-author of the 2014 Historic Structure Report, which we had done then for our CPC application at that time when we were looking to restore the windows, which was a lovely job and came off very well. We have the original windows now fully restored. And Stephen Mallory has left his private consulting firm when his partner retired, and he is now the head of historic structures and landscapes for the Peabody Essex Museum up north, and loves the tavern and has agreed to be our historic preservation architect, not only for the structural pieces, but when we address the first floor, which is where the original tavern exists, the original chimneys and fireplaces, and much of what you think of as the real museum piece. He has agreed to be our historic preservation architect for the renovation of that floor as we prepare it for visitors, educational groups, and opening it to the public for the revolution. So we're very excited to have him on board as well, and we hope that we will have your support as well for the structural sustainability of this magnificent building in our midst.
So the project that Rosen just outlined, like you said, if you were to go inside once it's all done, you will not notice any difference. It's sort of like, it's the infrastructure is behind the walls. But what it does is it creates for us a building now that we can really partner with someone who then knows that the infrastructure itself is sound. So part of why this is so important to us in terms of what we're trying to do in the long-term vision is that to really do that. We would think that that sometime in the future, depending on who we partner with and what the nature of that is and all that, We may actually have to require other funding that would then do the more cosmetic or the renovations within the first floor, perhaps the second floor, what is necessary to really make it internally then what would be in keeping with what that partner is. So we're leaving open that to do that, which leads us to this to our first question, obviously, is getting your support to the CPC. But the second part is, we're really, to be honest with you, we're kind of at the beginning of this. Although the task force itself has been meeting since January, February, and we picked up some speed. We kind of got set back a bit by the COVID, but it is what it is. And we've directed this time to look for other organizations that would really be ones that we ought to look at, because they could either be a model for us, or they could be a partner for us, or there's a great source for funding for what we want to do from a programmatic point of view. And whether that be 3 organizations or 1 organizations or whatever, we're just trying to figure out who's out there. So our second request, and this is something that you can do offline, not related to tonight's presentation, but if you know of organizations that you think that we should be talking to or be aware of or be in communication with, please send the contact information to me. As a chair of this, I am trying to take all this and I feed this back out to our task forces who are very serious about doing this. We're trying not to have any, I'll call it, communication or decisions at this time until we've done our research. One of the things that I think is important for my job is to, in some ways, get people engaged in doing the research, so that at some point in time, early next year, we can begin to really define what we want the Wright Tavern to be. And once we kind of have thought about that, then we also, I'm quite confident that we're going to come back to you and say, here are some ideas, here's some things that we're thinking about doing. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I tell you something, we got a group of people who are fired up, and I'm excited about what this can really be for First Parish, what it can be for the Wright Tavern, what it can be for the town of Concord, what it can be for our country.
So I just have a question.
Yes.
It might be a little bit premature, but it'll help me understand a little bit better. You've referenced the Buckman Tavern, which I'm familiar with.
Yes.
And I don't know if you're familiar with the Wyman House in Burlington, which I'm also familiar with. So those are 2 kind of on the ends of the spectrum.
Perfect.
When they renovated the Buckman Tavern,
Yeah, right.
they brought it up to current codes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, we're familiar with that. Yeah.
And
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Wyman House in Burlington,
I'm not as much. Tell me a little bit about it.
No.
but it's just as it was back in the 1700s. And so my question is, are you looking to kind of go one end of the spectrum, the other end of the spectrum, or somewhere in the middle?
That's a great question. And to be honest with you, we don't know at this point in time.
Right.
We're waiting to do, I want people to do the research, to investigate these organizations, to look at them. What did they do? What they did do? How would they do it? How's it work? How they fund it? How they govern it? What's the governance process? So that we can do something, once we commit to something, we know that we can do it and we can do it well. And so at this point in time, we're not exactly sure where that's going to be. But we think that, at least in terms of our 5-year plan, 2021, early part of 2021 will be the time when we define that and begin to say, what is the nature of this? Will it be just a place for like a museum kind of place, or will it be a place for reenactments? Will it be a place for something for more significant discourse and dialogue around what happened here 250 years ago?
Right. Well, it's good that you're undertaking it now, because the Buckman Tavern project took, a good 3 to 5 years.
Right. I know.
I can also speak to one element of that, which is that the Wright Tavern, because it changed hands so many times before it even came into First Parish, more than 100 years ago, and since then has been used as a commercial rental property. It's been upgraded. It has ADA bathrooms on the first floor. In many ways, it might not be suitable for it might not be suitable for restoration back to the original type of tavern that it was. A lot of it's gone frankly, you know, or on the second, on the third floor. The other thing is that unlike, say, a property like the Paul Revere House, just to use something very simple, or Orchard House, the tavern itself, the upper floors, like many taverns, the upper floors were hard to access. They were accessed through tiny, windy staircases and ladders and squirrely rooms. You know, you slept on straw mattresses and things like that. And so in some ways, it would be a real challenge to have the entire house be, the entire structure revert to what it would have looked like in 1747. It might be beyond the scope of anything that anyone could do effectively, let alone would do, just because of all the changes that have happened over the years. That said, the first floor is, with the exception of the ADA compliant bathrooms, the first floor is largely the original and could be made into, I'm going to use the wrong words, but if I said the kind of living museum experience that you have when you walk into a space with reproduction quality or museum quality artifacts, maybe from Concord Museum, maybe from Minuteman National Park, or maybe from the Old Manse or things like that. It's, the first floor speaks so much to the era and the activities of the time in ways that the second floor and the attic don't have that character, and might have lost it over the years. So part of how we're imagining it right now is with a very big open mind. If we could do a hybrid
Rosalind,
model.
what you're discussing is the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
That's exactly what it is. And then there's a whole bunch of nooks and crannies that we go through in the second and third floor, which no one is allowed into.
Exactly.
That's
You've got it
exactly
exactly
right.
right.
That's exactly right.
And in fact, it's not even safe to go up to the
Right,
second floor
correct.
entirely. Right. Beautifully said.
Yes, but for the purposes of what you're coming to us to ask for is really the CPC funding, which will be to stabilize and bring up to code this structure, so that, and that associated with that, I mean, we're not associated, but a part of your ongoing work will be to identify an ultimate use.
Yeah.
But for
Right.
Well
what
said.
you need from us right now is to endorse your proposal.
That's
So
Right.
that's what I would like to, thank you so much. It's very ambitious, it's very exciting, very thorough. You've assembled really terrific people, which is, I think, what I personally was really excited that Stephen Mallory, that's excellent. You know, it's
Very
important to
pleased.
have obviously someone of his professional background and achievement be associated with your project. So I guess what I would like to ask the members of the commission, if you have some relevant questions, or are we prepared to make a?
Melissa?
Yep.
Can I just say a couple of things really quickly? It seems to me you're going to have to decide whether this building is a kind of shrine, a landmark that you go to because it symbolizes something, or whether it's a historical artifact, piece of material culture that you really want to interpret. You put your case much more in terms of the shrine landmark than the material culture, but you're asking for funds to do the material culture.
You're right.
And that's important because not necessarily for us, but just as a recommendation to you, when you're proposing funding in other places and endorsements, you're going to have questions like the following. How much does it matter that this was a tavern?
Right.
You're going to interpret a tavern. What does a tavern do in the 18th century? Do 5-year-old and 9-year-old kids really need to know that?
Yeah.
The other thing is that you might want to raise the stakes of what you're doing. Seems to me, as I listen to you, the Wright Tavern is to the Provincial Congress in First Parish Church, as City Tavern is to Independence Hall in Philadelphia. And along that line, you should get in touch with, if you haven't, the new Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia.
We
Mhm.
are. You're
You have to
right.
be part of their network. If you email me, I can probably put you in touch with people. But I think
Wonderful.
we need to conceive of this in a larger historical frame than Concord.
I agree.
Because the Concord
We agree.
patriotism,
We agree.
as you spoke, sounds a bit like when I lived in Williamsburg, Virginia. And it turned out that the House of Burgesses was the most important place for the making of representative government in America, not Wright Tavern. In each case, it's the way in which the space, the particular building, reveals larger forces
Right.
that will
Right.
give you significance in the long run.
That's kind of what we're thinking about. So I really appreciate that, Bob. I will be in touch with you on that, because that is
Very well
exactly the
said.
kind of people we're looking for, to just to understand what they do. Does that apply? Can we do that here? Let's think big,
Yeah.
let's think bold, but let's also realize we've got some practical stuff to deal with as well. So
I'm really touched by what you just said, and I think you're exactly right that while we're very eager to start talking about the interpretive stuff and where we fit in the history and the revolution and the anniversary of the revolution, as a trustee and
mhm.
one of the very first readers of the building inspection report and then the structural engineering report, we had that, oh my God, it's not gonna be here moment if we don't fix the rafters, address the lally columns. And so the real pragmatist says that's really important, but if we don't actually shore up the building, I was joking about this with the HDC the other day. I said, look, the earthquake that just happened in Buzzards Bay could take this building down if Concord was the epicenter. We don't get to have the long-term conversation if we don't fix the short-term issues that we didn't even know existed. And now that we know, the responsible thing to do for the sustainability of the building and for thinking about all the larger ideas is keep it from falling apart, keep it from burning to the ground, make it stand.
And the fun part is we get that done, and then we move on to the next stage.
Exactly right.
And so we're not losing sight of the vision of what this place can be, but we need to, from the fundamental point of view, Rosalind's absolutely right on. If we don't have a foundation point that we can rely on, then the other ideas are wonderful ideas, but they'll never be.
Well, I would just add, the vision is your rationale for the significance of then the specific things you do with the building.
Yes, that's right.
Good. Well said.
Well said.
I just
Thank
want
you.
a photo because you referenced this. This was, if I can get it up there,
Uh-huh.
Paul Revere House in 1907.
Yeah.
So I can tell you that the Wright Tavern is in tremendous shape.
Yes. Wow. Woo.
Revere House in 1907. So
Wow.
That's great. That's great.
Well, that's great. That's marvelous.
screen, and I'm sure you can use that as a.
That's great.
That's great. Thank you.
So,
Paul?
members of the
Oh,
commission.
you can't see me, but it's
Oh,
Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi. I think Tom and Rosalind know a little bit about what I'm going to say. I'm very, very fearful that some of the work, especially on the mechanical systems, and the taking down of historic fabric, before we know what the building is going to be used for, as Alan was kind of getting to, and as somebody said at CPC the other night, what is your vision? What are you going to do? Those answers haven't been made, but assumptions are being made that it needs to be brought up to code, this code or that code, but we don't know which code because we don't know what's going to be done. The structural things, the Lally columns are horrifying. And so I believe that there are definitely things that should be addressed sooner rather than later. But I'm hoping with the addition of a historical architect that maybe those specific plans will be modified to preserve more of the historic fabric, especially on the third floor. And the second floor is not devoid. of
You're right.
historic fabric and references. So I personally think very strongly that it's premature to support this because we don't know what Wright Tavern wants to be. And those conversations haven't been made with the community yet. So while I'm very excited about the idea to do something wonderful with Wright Tavern, I'm very uncomfortable in terms of not knowing how as much historic fabric, according to the Secretary of the Interior standards, will be preserved.
I have
So-
another question. Following, it's a little different from Nancy, but you say you're going to create a Friends of Wright Tavern. Is that strictly for fundraising purposes? It is, you know, the ownership continues to reside in the trustees of the First Parish.
Right. So that's a great question, and one that we, it depends. Part of the purpose of doing the exploration and research about what's out there is that we can look at what kinds of relationships, ownership, governance relationships exist out there, and therefore decide what is necessary. So it's not off the table in terms of ultimately transferring the ownership to another entity, whether it be you know, our own creation or some partner. I just want to say that First Parish takes the responsibility for what happens to Wright Tavern very seriously, and has for you know, numbers of years, and so
Right.
so we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but whatever would happen would have to go to the congregation at large. But I think if it was a compelling enough story that we need to transfer the ownership to this separate entity, and the question becomes, what's the property? And there's a lot of things that will go into from a legal point of view, that would be worked out. But we want that to be in service of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and rather than trying to predetermine it one way or the other. It's
Actually, picking up on Nancy's point, in the early 19th century, the second floor of many taverns was a dance floor. And seriously, you got to be thinking a little bit historically about what you want to do. Because if you renovate the floor in a way that's actually at odds with the decision to be a historical interpretation,
Right.
that won't be a very good outcome.
Yeah.
I think
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because and Nancy, I was so grateful that you brought it back to our attention again the other day on the meeting, because we talked about it earlier. Last night, I spent almost an hour on the phone with Stephen Mallory. He's in love with the tavern and was thrilled to be asked to be participating again. So thank you very much for encouraging us to move in that direction. But he had a proposal that fit, to my mind, very well with how we're thinking. So I'll just explain briefly. Because the CPC application deadline of October 4th came about 6 months before we were ready as the Wright Tavern Futures Task Force or the trustees to have a full proposal ready. We basically were opportunistic about this, and we said, okay, we're going to put something together quickly with the understanding, and we also said it explicitly in the application, these are provisional. We have a lot of work to do, and the work isn't even going to start until earliest would be August or September of next year. So we have the time to do it right. So effectively, what I said to Stephen was what he saw, I sent him the copy of our project summary to the CPC and said, these are placeholders with actual estimates from real service providers, real contractors, real engineers, real insulators and others. They're placeholders for what we think it's going to cost. But what matters most here is that we do the right thing, not what's in an application we wrote last October, but what's right, what we can learn over the course of the next year. And he said, right off the bat, he said, that sounds great, because what I'd like to do, Stephen would like to do, is come to the tavern and spend a half a day alone
At least.
in the tavern, walking around room by room, floor by floor. He now has the building inspection report and the structural engineering report. And he said, I'll come back to you with my recommendations for what should be done. You don't have to listen to, and he said, in that way, if I'm guiding, if I write the preservation specs, that's the expression he used, if I write the preservation specs, The contractors aren't going to say, oh yeah, we're going to replace the girders and install insulation. They're going to do exactly what the spec tells them to do. And if the spec says replace that lath, or if the spec says, you know, don't touch that girder, or if it, whatever it says, he said, they'll do what the spec says.
Well, you know,
That's exactly what we need.
I'm sorry, a mitigation for some of that work that may or may not be necessary. And I think maybe, you know, a contractor's taking a traditional contractor approach.
Exactly.
But if it's agreed that some historic fabric really does need to be removed, it's very, very, very important to document that in a way. And so I didn't see that in there either, but I'm sure that will occur to him, to a preservation architect. That's
correct. Correct.
So.
And there are even things that, so we've had conversations, for example, with Tom Putnam, the executive director of the Concord Museum, where we've said, if we're going to be doing renovations here, we need to be working with the museum to assist us on replacing or providing replica artifacts, or are there pieces that does the museum want to do a photo essay of the existing tavern? And everybody is saying, we're so delighted. Everybody is saying the exact same thing. We want to have full documentation. We want to do the correct thing to the Wright Tavern, the right thing to the Wright Tavern.
You know, your slogan to be do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
Do the right thing for the right time.
Yeah.
But from what Nancy is bringing up, it seems to me that there's a fair amount of work you still need to do to determine the ultimate use of this. And it might change the
treatment
work that's being done. I know you need to stabilize it. Look, I can't believe that there are people in that building. I'm surprised that they're allowed to be there, given.
So that's the difference between the Wyman House and the Buckman Tavern.
I can't hear you.
That's the difference between the Buckman Tavern and the Wyman House in Burlington.
Although the lolly columns wouldn't be allowed to be the way they are, right? Somebody would
joists that are floating in thin air. I mean, we have to stabilize the building.
Yeah.
But maybe it's done in a historic way. Maybe it's not, depending on what your ultimate goal is.
Ultimate use of this place. So it seems to me, I'm not sure exactly how Nancy would vote on this, but while I support everything that you want to do, I feel you need to know what the ultimate use is, because it's going to drive a lot of how the things are going to, any kind of alteration. Yes. And you've got a lot of fantastic ideas, and you're continuing to reach out. I know Bob has terrific connections. Nancy certainly would through her National Park Service.
Yep.
While I endorse what you are ultimately trying to do, I don't feel it's fully cooked.
We don't either.
Yeah, we agree. We agree. And we are really glad that we've got a year before, a shovel hits the ground, as it were.
I mean, I think all of us feel,
or more.
A number of us have been involved with trying to plan for the 250th celebration of 1775. But COVID got in the way, and we've sort of lost a year here. So I suspect you're also feeling the pressure. But as Bob says, it's better to do the right thing for the right tavern.
Right. I think to the point of that, we're developing a process to review this with people, get input, and create a decision process that ultimately results in, as Rosalind said, in really the right way, the right kinds of decisions. And so we're, as I said, we're at the beginning, we're reaching out, we're studying it. This is the first part of it, to be honest with you, part of the agenda for tonight is just to tell you about what we're doing. And not independent to the CPC proposal, because we're excited about that. And we want to begin the process of opening this thing up from a transparency point of view and from a decision point of view, but we don't want to get it so locked into so many different people who never can make a decision that we never get anything done. So the process, I think, is we're trying to develop a thoughtful, well-considered, with lots of input kind of process. And in some ways, the last several nights with you all tonight, with the HDC, obviously with CPC, this is our coming out party. We are like coming out to say this. We're very first, we actually acknowledge that we haven't fully defined all the
There's a
things
lot
that
we
we
have to
want to
do.
do.
Tom, can I just add one last thing? A way to focus your thinking would be an answer to this question. What will you do with Wright Tavern on April 19th, 2025?
It's a great question. I would see us, depending on what's happening at the Concord Museum, what's happening at Minuteman, what's happening in Concord, what's happening, that is part of that celebration. There'll be people there. In my own particular vision is that there'll be people, the building will be open, there'll be some sort of reenactment, but it will be what's happening. The actually more important time is in October of 2024, because that's when.
But my point really is,
that's
you
actually
need to think about what's distinctive about what you're bringing to that commemoration.
Yeah.
I just want to, I haven't chimed in yet, and it sounds like I might be in the minority here, but I would say I'm fully prepared to endorse that letter of support for your CPC proposal. I think as the newest member of this commission, a lot of what I've seen is people ready to knock historic structures down or hoping to knock historic structures down. And I think what you folks have done, putting together this incredibly detailed, thoughtful report, as far as I can see, to save something that's so worth saving, whatever that ultimate end turns out to be, hybrid, historical, whatever it is, I think it's fantastic. So I think I have very wholehearted support for what you guys have done, and yeah, excited to see. I think with the understanding that there's time to figure out exactly where those funds are going to go and what that restoration is going to look like, I would be behind this letter of support.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd just like to note and point out to the applicants that the CPC funding is very specific. So should you, be recommended funding at town meeting and should be approved at town meeting, it's for very specific projects.
Right.
So were you to change your mind and want to use the funding some way else, you can't.
Right.
We know that. Yes,
Okay.
we know that.
Okay.
Yeah, trying to get all that together.
And that's partly the reason that we focused on things like the alley columns, the joists, the beams, the rafters, the stuff that a lot of people think of as really boring. And this is phase one, and phase two will be the actual usage renovations coming. But we're still, again, we're not, we're taking this one step at a time. We're not trying to get ahead of ourselves. We don't know all the answers. They're exactly the questions we're asking. What are we going to be doing in April of 2025? We have a lot of work to do, and we want to have the building there for us to
Rosalind,
do it.
have you spoken to Maria Madison? The last time this happened, I was kind of partially involved with the Robbins house. And the thing that really strikes me about this wonderful centrality, the power of place, everything about the Wright Tavern, but at least you don't have to move it.
Yes, we don't.
Move it. One great advantage, and I was part of that early process. I was to go to the meetings and see everything involved. There's an incredible amount of things to consider, usage, preservation. So it's my favorite American saying is "Get all your ducks in a row."
You're right.
And then we'll be all set. And I certainly agree. It will have my full support. It's very exciting.
One question. Can you tell us how to get copies of the historic structures report and the engineering report and the building inspector's report?
Yes, they were all included as attachments with the CPC application.
Oh, okay. So Heather, we'd have to get those from you.
Yeah, Heather has them all.
Yeah, I think I have them.
We can resend them.
We can send them again to everybody.
I mean,
Are they
just
electronically?
want to send me electronic copies of it.
Yeah.
They're all PDFs.
Yeah,
all PDFs.
send me the PDFs.
Oh, great. That'd be
Okay,
great.
would you like me to send them again, Heather, as a kit?
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure,
Thank you.
sure, happy to. Would be
Thank
very happy
you.
to.
And we'll throw in our presentation too, just so you have a little.
Yeah.
That'd
Thank
be
you.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, so folks, I'm not exactly sure, Heather, help. I'm not sure whether we have a full consensus. I mean, I'm going to take a vote, I guess, if whether you feel comfortable with the limitations of your application for the funding, which, you know, you talked about a lot of stuff in your presentation. Probably would have been easier, or maybe to your advantage, just to limit it to kind of the safety concerns of shoring up this property rather than your rather ambitious ideas about where you may take this place. Because I think that's where I share with Nancy a concern that you need to know where you want to end before you start messing around with this building. But given that, are there other comment from the members of the commission, or do you feel you're all in a position to kind of take a position?
I'd rather wait. I really would, to see a little bit more about
The ultimate
what's going to be destroyed
I
above
guess-
the first floor, and how
I'd
that
like
can
to
be.
see a little bit more definitive types of work that's going to be done.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob, what is your feeling?
I know, I'm willing to go along with it. I think you've laid out both, especially a process by which you're making decisions that's very transparent.
But how do you
Michael?
change the direction? No, I'm sorry. I just don't know how you change direction. Because what we'd be endorsing would be the application as written
Mm.
and the work
Exactly.
as written, without knowing what that work is really. That's where I'm hung up. But anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, I'll be quiet. I'll
No,
mute
no,
myself.
thank you. Michael, what do you, because you've done this kind of work.
So first of all, rather than debate any issues, I certainly would support this at this time for one specific reason. As many of you know, I worked very hard on trying to get funds for the Silas Holden House. It took me 3 or 4 years. And the weird part about it is the money was given to me and I never asked for it. And it wasn't anything I was looking to do, and I wasn't in the business at that time anymore. But the fact of the matter is if there are structural issues, if there are issues right now that would lead to further deterioration of this structure that are going to be addressed as part and parcel of this scope of work, then I think that has to be addressed right away. Because what good is it if for some reason or other the roof collapses or something happens? Now what do? And now you're going to have to just build a new structure, which doesn't make sense, and it's going to lose its relevance, not relevance to the location or relevance to what happened there, but certainly relevance to the things that what we look at every day when we go to Concord Center, whatever. So and they certainly have done a lot of work. Their documents are going to be sent over to Heather, that could be forwarded to all of us. And it looked like, when I looked at all the scope, it looked like most of that work was addressing the existing issues on the structure that are leading to further deterioration, which I think needs to be addressed if we're going to save this house. Okay.
Tom?
I'm going to take that kind of conservative approach as well. And it's let's again, using that great term, get all our ducks in a row and see what potential problems are going to be there with something that is so precious culturally, historically, and physically. And its location. It really needs to be done well.
And Rebecca, I know you are supportive. I guess I'm just a little ambivalent. I hear what Nancy is saying, that you would hate to have them do something that might be irreversible. On the other hand, from what you're describing, it really is about stabilization. I mean, if the building were in imminent danger, you have the funds right now to address that, I would presume. Right? Rosalind?
The danger is not considered imminent, but significant. So if I said to you, and you'll see in the building inspection and the structural engineering report, among the things that that the individuals said as they were going through, walking around the building, was like, look, if everything stays the same, the building is going to continue to deteriorate, and deterioration tends to, speed up as it goes along. There is so that's one problem that just is there, and in part you can see it, but we didn't know the depth of it until we had the very first inspections ever done on the Tavern's history. The second part is if there is an unusual event, I think of things like the earthquake that just happened, or
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think of things like, hurricanes. I'm from the Midwest and we know tornadoes. It's not that you expect it, it's just that we didn't expect COVID, or we didn't, nobody in Buzzards Bay was expecting an earthquake this week. And we were lucky that it was a small one. But if there was a larger event of some kind, or for example, if not a car, but if a tour bus veered off and, hit
Well,
a corner or something, the building is not stable enough to sustain something more dramatic. And we're not talking about apocalypse and, Bruce Willis movies. We're just talking about the things that can happen to older buildings as they fall apart over the years, especially if there have been failures of repair, or if no repairs have been done.
I also feel like it's important to consider our mandate as the CHC, which you guys aren't changing anything about the exterior of the building, correct? And
Nope.
in terms of
Not even touching the exterior,
right,
really.
and in terms of other buildings that we vote to be preferably preserved, technically, right, we're saying that people can do whatever they want inside, and you guys aren't even doing whatever you want. You're going to be very historically thorough, from my understanding. So
Hope.
So to me, that speaks to what we are as the CHC saying, you're not affecting the outside of the building in any way.
Wait, just
yeah.
I have to interrupt. Heather,
Sure.
Can you clarify that? The Historical Commission is not bound to HDC standards for exterior work only.
Well, in terms of demo review, you don't consider the interior of a structure.
But that doesn't mean we can't. For the demo review, that may be circumscribed, but as a historical commission, certainly the interior of Wright Tavern is extremely important.
I think in terms of this request, because the application is for interior changes.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have any jurisdiction over HDC properties anyway. So that's
no, we don't.
That doesn't matter. I think to me the issue here is ultimate use of this property, and it's because of its incredible historic value to not only the town of Concord but the United States. And I think that's where I'm a little hung up, because I hear what Nancy is saying. On the other hand, I personally appreciate that you're concerned you got to shore this building up. You want to make it, to make it in a position where you can, buy additional time to determine what you're going to do. But in the fear, I think that Nancy rightfully suggests, is that you may do something that might be irreversible.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
No, yeah.
Is there a way, there should be a way that we could wait to hear what your historical architect might recommend that might be within the same categories of work, but the methods and the extent of things could be different. That might be, we might just delay this for next month or whenever his report might be due or his musings might be due. Then we would know a little bit more, because we haven't read the historic structures report or any of the stuff that I feel I would really want to see first.
When's your due date for submission to CPC?
November 20th. November 20th.
Well, we don't have time then for
We
that.
wouldn't have time. One alternative would be to write a letter with some provisions that we would ask of you. And that's something we've done in the past, right, Heather? I believe.
Sure, we could do that.
You know, because I think, you know, I think we all agree we want to preserve this property. There's no question of that. It's just
Right.
the how you do it and the ultimate use, we do have a concern. So,
I would take it a step further and say we, as both the trustees and we as the Wright Tavern Futures Task Force, would want to share the historic preservation architect's recommendations with you, as well as with the CPC, as well as with the Concord Museum and Minutemen and, you know, the other supporters here and the potential partners we're going to work with. We would want your feedback. You're experts at things that Tom and I are not experts at, and it would be a real gift. I would be sorry if you delayed a letter of support because we really hope that the application moves forward. But we would think of you as strategic partners throughout this whole process. This is not the first time we're going to be standing in front of you, I'm sure.
Right. Exactly.
So in 8 days, what can you change?
Not a thing at this point. We can't.
We can't
they've
do it.
already submitted it to the CPC.
Okay.
Well, so
Well-
we've been at this a long time and we actually have a fair amount on our agenda. So
Thank you.
could I ask members of the commission, if we were to provisionally endorse this project? Nancy, perhaps you could send me some language and we could work up a letter. And then I would actually ask Heather if we could send it to all members of the commission before we sent it. That'd be fair.
So we could send it to the commission just to view it, but we couldn't, outside of a meeting, take comments from everyone.
Well, that's true. That's true, because it wouldn't be the public wouldn't hear it. Well, then I would ask, how about this? I'll ask Nancy if you would send in your comments independently. Is that fair?
Okay.
Well, so
If that's, see, yeah.
So I think that kind of maybe
That doesn't work.
inappropriate just because Nancy is on the CPC.
Oh,
So I think it would be myself and one member of the commission drafts the letter, and that would be it. Everyone else, we can send it to them to see it, but we don't have enough time to get, have it at a meeting and have comments back and everything. So it would just have to be the commission trusting whoever is designated along with myself to draft the letter.
Okay.
I have a technical, that I know we're out of time, but this, a technical question. I wish I knew more about CPC's constraints and latitude. $100,000 for reinforcing the attic floors and rafters. I think that's probably one of the least altered areas of the tavern. And I wonder how much latitude the tavern would have in adjusting what they did there for $100,000. And if they ended up doing something more conservative, they could do the essential things. Like, I think people could probably shore up the lolly columns in the basement next week or something. But the rafters are something, as you can see, much more significant in how
Right.
that's done.
Correct.
So
Okay, I think, but
is there,
now
I
we're
think
getting-
there's latitude to work within the categories maybe, but I'm still nervous about it. But anyways,
So-
okay, that's it.
Okay, so Heather, I propose you and I work on this letter. Is it fair? Fair to everybody?
Yeah, someone would have to make a motion.
So I make a
Uh,
way to put whatever dialogue verbiage you want in the letter that would allow you the opportunity to address Nancy's concerns and everyone's concerns. However, allow them to proceed with the
Proceed with that, we would endorse their application.
yes.
Do
Like
I
a
have,
provisional endorsement letter.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
So all in favor, I have to ask you individually. Alan,
Aye, yes.
Bob,
Yes,
Michael,
Yes.
Tom,
Hey, but
Rebecca,
Yes.
Nancy,
No,
Melissa, yes. Okay, so that carries. Thank you. Thank you all. I mean, I think obviously there's a lot of emotion riding on this because it's a very, very important building and
It's
you've
very
got
important.
very ambitious and, thank you very, very much.
And we look forward to talking with you more about this in the future, as you will know. This is a good discussion tonight and really helpful for us to learn what the concerns are and what the aspirations are for people. So we've got a lot of work to do and we're looking forward to it.
I'd also like to say that Tom and I would both be very happy to take any one of you or all of you on tours of the tavern. And I'd like to reach out to Nancy in particular, because Nancy, you have so much more expertise than we have, that if it would make sense for you to join Stephen on his day in the tavern, top to bottom, we would be thrilled if you wanted to take that time with him.
I would love to do that, but I would suggest that I'm a landscape architect, and maybe I could give you a National Park Service historical architect as in lieu of.
Yeah.
Any
and
version.
Also, just having a CPC member there for that is probably not appropriate.
You're right. No,
Right.
you're right.
I've seen it before.
Right.
Yes, of course you
Okay.
have, but yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think in the interest of the rest of our commission, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
we'll
very
move on
much.
Very, very much.
Grateful.
We'll get
Really
that letter.
appreciate it.
All right.
And we'll
Okay.
see you again soon, I'm sure.
Well,
Yeah, great
Thank you.
meeting you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so that was long. Sorry about all that, but it seemed like we needed to talk that through and they're still not resolved clearly. So moving on to the warrant article, I hope all of you have had the opportunity to review the warrant article with the amendment suggested by town council. I'll just open it up and ask for your comment, beginning with his first note of, in 2.7, where he has us eliminate the 50-year and the different language there.
Has everyone looked it over? Do you want me to share the screen and walk through it real quick? Does anyone have
You have
specific
it, that would
questions?
be very helpful.
Yeah, could you share
have
the
it?
screen?
You share? I don't have it in front of me.
Can everyone see this?
Not yet.
I've read it. I've read it.
Everyone can see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so in 2.7, town council suggested taking out the date entirely, just because that's not what triggers the review. What triggers the review is down in 3.1 and 3.2. So this isn't going to change, it's still, we're changing it to the 50 or more years older will trigger review. He's just saying that the date doesn't need to be in the historically significant definition, because you need to meet these other criteria to be historically significant. The date itself doesn't necessarily make it, or the age of the structure necessarily doesn't make it historically significant. And he's reviewed he's town council for many other towns. So this is just his professional opinion on demolition review bylaws and how they should be worded.
Is this typical verbiage from other towns?
Yes.
Yes.
Heather, can
seems-
I ask you a question about 2.7 subsection 1?
Yes.
So others of you will know far better than I, but I read that as, the third possible criterion, as that if I were in the real estate market, it has a measure of uncertainty. I don't know in advance of wanting to engage in a transaction whether or not my property will be considered historically significant. And I could go to a lot of trouble planning on selling and then discover that it was declared to be so. And I wonder about that uncertainty. I see the point of doing this, but it does seem to me that it could really undercut people who are moving ahead confidently and then find out a commission comes in and says, oh, no, we just found out you're historically significant.
I'm not sure I'm following. So
Me either.
Well, I took it that, you can
this
apply
is
for a
only-
demolition
This is
permit.
only in terms of demolition review bylaw. So this is only for projects that trigger demolition review.
Right, no, I get that. But the point is, under current rules, you know that your building is potentially coming under that. This
What,
you don't
because
know as clearly.
You say that, Bob, because it's a certain date? That's what you're referring to?
Yeah,
So the date
that's
is
what-
triggered by under 3.1 and 3.2.
Yeah,
So this doesn't
not
change
Yeah.
how it's triggered. So they would still know if our building is 50 or more years older, we trigger demolition review.
Yeah,
okay.
that doesn't change it. I think what the town council is just streamlining the language under 2.7 because we would still be moving to the 50-year cutoff, which is what we had discussed about. It strikes me that very reasonable to adopt the language that town council proposes for 2.7. Because I think, I think we have discussed the importance of a 50-year cutoff instead. And he still endorses that
Mhm.
under 3.1.
Can you scroll down to that, Heather?
Yep.
Just to,
Yep, so 3.1, it would
okay,
still
so-
be under procedure, no demolition permit for a building or structure which is in whole or in part 50 years or older shall be issued by the building commissioner. And so that's what triggers the review. So technically, up in 2.7, that's not what triggers review. That's just the definition of historically significant.
got it.
Yeah, which I think is kind of cleaner.
Yeah, so he's saying that it doesn't need to be there.
Mhm.
What do others?
Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, so then under 2.7, part 3, section C.
Well, the 2.71, he's saying we should just remove the eligible for
Oh.
listing language, just because he says it's basically repetitive of A, B, and C below, because those are really the criteria for making something eligible
Mhm.
for listing on the National Register
Okay.
anyways. So it's really just, he said it's not
Redundant.
necessary to have that there.
Got it, that makes sense. Then the next thing, under contextually similar,
Yeah, so he was a little concerned about C in general. And I explained it to him that, we've done this in the past, that a structure came up under demolition review, was delayed for a year. It was, directly adjacent to a local historic district, and we took it to town meeting and added it to the historic district. So
that's the
kind of
Sudbury
speaks
Road.
to what happened there on Sudbury Road, in that if a structure is located within 150 feet of the boundary line of a historic district, there's a likelihood that, it qualifies to be within that historic district. But he was a little iffy about it. He understood where we were coming from, especially when I reminded him about the Sudbury Roadhouse. But he said he'd like to see that contextually similar language defined a little bit more. And he didn't really give me a lot of guidance on that. So I don't know if anyone's had some time to think about that.
I would argue the opposite. I wouldn't want to be more specific. I would rather allow us some leeway. It's an interpretation. A lot of this is interpretation.
Right. And I think that's what he's nervous about, is
Mhm.
defending that.
What are
I
the
know, right?
criteria?
So this language, should someone challenge it?
Would you say architecturally similar, or is that?
I think we
I think-
probably could say architecturally similar, or like
Could-
replace it with some sort of phrase like architecturally, and I don't know, something to do with like the error, or
Rebecca, how about if it said similar in architecture or landscape or historical usage? Because
Yeah,
contextually
it
similar,
gets to be a little wordy, but that's definitely more thorough. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How's that, Heather? Similar in architecture, landscape, or historical usage?
we say similar architecturally historic uses and the historic landscape of the
Yeah.
district.
Yeah, yeah,
I think, because I think just saying landscape, historic landscape of the district,
yeah,
we're
Yeah.
thinking of
yes,
how it fits in that historic landscape.
yes. I like that. Others?
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
Could we build in a thing about houses built as McMansions that should be demolished after 50 years?
That's our next challenge. Okay,
Okay, so I will fix that and send it back to him and see what he thinks of that.
and then
Um,
3.1 is the 50-year thing.
Yep, so this is the 50 years. He's a bit concerned that it may not pass at town meeting, that someone may make an amendment on the floor to remove this. So he said he just suggested having a backup warrant article that maybe just goes back to the 1941 so that the article as a whole doesn't fail. We have a backup to still make the other changes.
Okay,
So that was just his comment on that.
We could present this as the Rip Van Winkle clause.
Do we want to, is there a middle ground though? I'm thinking of that Jenny, what was it, Jenny Dugan Lane? Is that what it's
Mhm.
called? Where the houses, as I recall, were from the 50s, right? Do we want to try and at least push that 1941 for, even if they were to fight us on the 50 years or older, bump that 1941 up to 1960 to, something that would preserve areas of the town that we know people are possibly thinking of.
I think it might be hard on the floor of town meeting to then, totally try
Have
to
Okay.
give a presentation about a new date when we just tried
Yeah.
to defend a
Okay.
different date. We may just have to take the loss on that and
Okay.
come back next year, the following year with it, with a different time frame.
I agree with that.
So,
okay, I think I realized I missed one. The other key, which he did not change, is the 2.9, which sets the determination as of the date of the hearing.
right, he
So
had
he's
no
not
issues with
here
that.
yet. So I think, that's a great victory if we could get that
That's
through.
huge.
Right,
I agree.
right.
So I guess I would lose the 50 if they challenged us on that. So what he's saying is that to be prepared to have a warrant article that has everything else we were proposing, except the 50-year change.
Right.
Is that Heather?
Right, so that if someone makes an amendment on the floor, then we can stand up and say, okay, we have an amendment, here's our written warrant article with this amendment to just bring it back to the 1941 and
1941.
changes.
Okay,
But you
I
have to
would
have
support
it already drafted,
okay. So basically, it's everything we've got in here except 3.1 remains built before 1941. Is that
Right.
correct?
Right, 3.1 and 3.2, yeah.
3.2, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
How does everyone feel about that? Because those are the principal, those are the changes. We have support, everyone support that? Heather, do we need to take a vote?
Yes, we probably need to vote just for me to amend the warrant article and resubmit it as discussed.
Okay, may I have a proposal that we adopt the changes that have just been discussed on 2.7 and including the language that was proposed under 2.73C, and that we, for the purposes of our proposed warrant article, it adopts the 50-year change, but that we have a backup article that reverts to the 1941 change. How about if I just, can that be a motion and somebody can second me?
Well, someone has to so move.
So moved.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
I second.
Thank you. Okay, can we move on, Heather?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
everyone.
So
Don't we have to vote?
You need a vote.
Oh, yeah, we need to
Oh,
vote.
I'm sorry, all in favor? I'm sorry. This Zoom
Yep,
thing,
roll
man.
call, roll call.
Roll call. So Ellen,
I,
yes?
yes,
Bob?
Yep,
Michael?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Nancy?
I,
And me, yes. Thank you. Okay. Then updates on the 1710 Lowell Road. So I can just report that I've been in touch with Middlesex again this week. They've explained to me that the Board of Trustees will not actually meet until January. However, the Building and Grounds Committee meets frequently. They are still very interested in this property. They have been in touch with various town departments. I think they're trying to get a sense of what all they can do, how much it will cost before they would present this to their board in January. But they do intend to present to them. They explained to me that, they're trying to get the kids squared away through and out by Thanksgiving. And obviously that's their priority. I also have been in touch with Jack Trost, who is the head of the Carlisle Historical Society. They're doing a walkthrough on Monday with Larry Sorley and others. And Jack said to me that in fact, among the group, I don't know who's going, there is someone who's interested in buying it as well. So I think, the house looks like it may well get saved. We hope that at least there are two possible buyers. And Middlesex absolutely understands that we would expect the level of care and renovation, even though they might turn it into housing, that the facade itself and its basic massing structure would remain the same.
Thank you, Melissa, for.
Well, thank you. They've been great, Rebecca. They really have been quite interested.
Yeah.
It should be,
wonderful.
the
I'm so
property.
glad to hear it. Yeah.
It's listed for $650,000. I don't know what all they can do on the rest of the land. I don't know.
Right,
Yeah.
and the only other thing I would, suggest to them, especially if someone comes along and buys the property out from under everyone's feet in the next, couple of weeks, and that wants to tear the house down, is that the house could be moved onto Middlesex property,
Yep.
and still save it that way. So
Good.
if someone comes in and buys that property with the intention of tearing it down at the end of the delay, then we work hard to try to get that structure moved somewhere.
Great.
So,
Okay. So moving on,
we
the
did skip
membership.
over sustainability guide. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to review that yet.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I'm sorry. That, yes, that's excellent.
It's a remarkable document. I don't know.
It really is excellent.
That is
I,
impressive. Extraordinary.
my question was how does that get distributed, or how is it promoted,
Yes.
or make sure people are aware of it?
So that's what I wanted everyone to review it, because I'd like to be able to post it on the Historical Commission's webpage. So especially under like the demo delay page. So it's people just see it everywhere they go. So
That's
I
great.
wanted everyone to make sure they read through the document and review it and make sure they feel comfortable with me posting it on the website as something that you guys are endorsing, basically.
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
it's very impressive. I would endorse it.
It's phenomenal. And I don't know, I'm assuming everybody read it because it wasn't forwarded to us. So are we making a motion to move forward, or are we waiting? Or are we just talking right now?
Yeah, I probably don't need a motion for this. Just as long as, everyone hand raise is okay with me posting it on the Historical Commission's website, then I'll go ahead and do it.
That way, everyone raise their hands. Yes, I mean, I would be very proud to be associated with it.
I
Thank you.
can't raise my hand, but I vote yes.
What is your lid?
How come
No.
you don't have vision? you don't have, your iPad doesn't have a,
You can raise your hand with a little icon.
I don't have respectable backgrounds, virtual or actual right now.
well,
Huh?
you'd think my prison
I've been on the
rules were-
beach all day.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
let's
The
move
back
on.
part there.
Okay, thank you. So then, commission membership. So just a reminder to everybody that Nancy, Alan, and myself, we are expiring as of,
You were all reappointed.
oh, we were. Oh, well, thank you. Okay.
I'll drink to
Very
that.
good, very
And
good,
up-
Dada.
Then the next thing we do need, I think, so Nancy was reappointed as a CPC, but we need to have a chair. We need to vote on a chair and a clerk.
Who's gonna accept nominations? Is that what you do? How does this go?
Someone just
Uh,
makes a motion.
Nominate
Or
So we
not
need
nomination,
nomination.
yeah.
for the chair.
I would nominate our Utah commuter to
And I would,
take on
I would
another term
second,
as chair.
I second
Okay.
that.
Does the dog go to Utah?
Of
She
course.
is, and she's
Of
no
course.
problem. Entertain her. The dog is here, right here. Here, come here, dog.
I recognize the bark.
Okay, so there was a nomination for Melissa for chair and a second. So we do need a vote on that.
Okay, so all in favor, I will ask.
No,
roll
no.
call. This is embarrassing. Alan, thank you.
Yes.
Can they just raise their hand? No,
Technically, no.
Yes,
no. Okay, Alan,
yes.
Bob,
Yes,
Michael? He's muted. Tom,
Yes,
Rebecca?
Yes.
Go back
Nancy?
to, yes, go back to Michael. I think he was saying.
he raises his
Yes.
hand.
There he goes. And I vote
Okay.
yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay,
Now we can.
Now,
okay.
Yes, yes.
So do one more year. So do we have a clerk?
so I don't know if we actually have a clerk right now. But we do need a clerk according to our bylaw. So I don't know why we've never had a clerk in the past. But maybe this is good since I'll be out for the next 3 months. A clerk, is in charge of making sure the minutes get drafted, or, helping review them before the commission, whoever drafts them at that meeting helps to proofread them before the meeting, that sort of thing.
Tom lived in the manse, so he's ready to be a clerk.
Nominate
So
Rebecca.
are you nominating
I'm
Tom?
not hearing, the line's not very good.
Michael's making a nomination.
Do we nominate Rebecca as a clerk or not? Because she's an associate.
Yeah, would you?
That's a good
Oh,
question.
yeah, and Rebecca,
Are you listening to me?
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
we're listening.
yeah.
She's just wondering if, as an associate, does it make any difference?
I think you might have to be a full member to hold a position. Yeah.
So then Tom, would you accept, okay, I'll second Tom, if we can do Rebecca.
Well, it's just Tom won.
Nominate,
Oh, my. Oh, my.
all those in favor?
Tom, it will be easy. It will be easy.
You can double up by posting it on Facebook.
So it doesn't mean that the clerk has to be the one to take minutes during my
No.
absence. You guys can, discuss that
We're
at the
gonna
beginning of
share,
the
we'll share
meeting,
that.
and share that job.
An increase in pay, Tom.
Oh, good, I'm in. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay.
And
All in favor of Tom, Alan? Are you voting
Yes.
for Tom? Yes, Bob? Yes, Michael? Tom, are you voting for yourself?
You can't do that.
Yes, you can. Rebecca?
You can? Oh, my.
Yeah, Nancy?
And I
Didn't your
vote
mother
yes.
tell you you should always vote for yourself? Okay,
Really?
thank you, Tom.
Interesting.
My pleasure. The pay rise did it.
Other business public comments. I just have a little thing I would like to mention about the 612 Barrett's Mill. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I know there was a discussion about supporting their request for a zoning variance. And in fact, the people who are developing that property never even asked for a variance. And if you've been driving by there, you'll see that the people tore down most of the structure,
Most of it,
which was just a disgrace.
right, the whole thing, except one wall.
One
Well,
wall.
and two little side walls. Two little
Ooh.
side
A
walls.
great
Well-
way to circumvent the demolition review bylaw.
Yeah,
It's
it's-
just awful.
I
it's
almost
awful.
grew
And
up.
I just want to know that the folks from Save Our Heritage really acted in good faith when they asked us to support this variance. They were just as shocked as we were. So it's really distressing. It's such an important.
I'm mostly, well, not mostly, but I'm also very disappointed in one of the owners who is, I don't know, the owner editor of Historical Concord. What's the name of that magazine?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Jennifer
one.
Schuneman.
What's her
Schuneman.
name? Schuneman. Yes, right. And I think it's a real shame. And that architectural firm we should keep an eye on because they've been associated with another sad story that I can't actually remember now. But
So Nancy, do you remember the name of the firm? I actually don't know.
no, but their sign is in front of the house.
Could we put on the agenda for our next meeting some kind of inquiry to how this can happen as an evasion of the demolition bylaw?
So it's because, so
Perfectly legal.
yeah, so the demolition review bylaw as drafted now states that the total build, I'd have to pull
Right.
it up and read it.
And it's total demolition.
Yeah, it's total demolition of the structure above grade triggers review. So they didn't totally demolish everything above grade. So technically they circumvented the
Well, then
bylaw.
maybe we should be looking at the proposed amendment so that it would say that it has to do with demolition in total or in substance.
Yeah, so that's on our list of changes to make to the demolition review bylaw. Other towns have recently made similar changes like Newton because they were seeing the same thing happening. But that's another huge one. So we can't make these big, huge changes to the bylaw all in 1 year.
But why not? Actually, Karen, why
It'll
not?
never
People
pass a
can
town
tear
meeting.
down a building in quickly. Yeah, I mean, what you're really saying is people can tear down a building far more quickly than we can amend our process. That's akin to, the line about lies can get halfway around the earth before truth has time to tie his sneakers.
Changing, well, it would never, if we made all of these huge changes to the demolition review bylaw at once, it would get shot down at town meeting immediately and there'd be no more discussion on
Well,
it.
that's a
I
prediction.
think that is an
not
assumption, though.
empirically proven.
I've seen it happen. You have to like choose your battles and
Yep.
pick your battles going into town meeting on what you're trying to convince town meeting of. And when you're trying to convince them to overhaul your entire bylaw and make all these changes, people are going to be like, whoa, 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 hold it. You have to go in incrementally.
I don't-
Otherwise, it would be a waste of our time and our whole year working towards it.
I don't totally disagree with you, but I think we need to say something at town meeting or say something much more publicly about this being a really horrific gap in our ability to protect the town's resources.
So I both agree and disagree. I don't
Yeah,
think
me
that
too.
comment should come from the historical commission because someone's just going to retort and say, it's your bylaw. It's your bylaw they worked around. So I don't think that because we had Melissa and I had kind of like talked about that, like, should we write the journal or something about this? And I don't think that should come from the historical commission because it's our bylaw that they circumvented. And it's our bylaw that didn't require them to come to us.
But there's no way
Well-
that that could have been stopped.
No,
Not the way
Get
the laws
not
are
the way it's
written.
written.
Can we get some concerned citizen to write into the Concord
Well,
Journal?
yeah.
Just to bring it to people's attention. It just
I think
seems-
it should be an article in the Concord Journal.
Yeah.
And Rebecca, I think we should be able to get somebody to do that.
So I think like if there's going to be an article in the journal by, you know, more of an article and less of like a, what are those like when you write in with
Letter to the editor.
yeah, letter to the editor.
Opinion.
No, it has to be pictures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would need to be very cautious about what is stated to those journalists because they like to take our words and twist them.
But you
Wonder
give
if
them
we
a-
could get
an
asked-
outline of the article.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
I
it
wonder
doesn't
if
work
we
that
could
way. They take my words and twist them. In the
Does
past.
anybody, can we think of anybody who would be as concerned as we are, who would be moved to write in just independently?
Well, it occurs to me we might ask Electa Trich. What do you think?
Oh, good
Good
idea.
idea.
Really
Um,
good idea.
I'm gonna have to cut out because I have to take this dog out. I'm sorry, but I would be willing to call Electa
It's a good idea.
this week and ask her if she would be, you know, I've got some pictures that I could give to her. I mean, I have been out of, you know, I've been here for a couple weeks. I don't know what it looks like now, but the pictures I have, I think are pretty devastating that I could give to her to accompany her article. So if you think that would be a good idea, I will do that.
Mhm.
That'd
I
be-
think
also-
if Elect is willing to do it, she'd be a great person.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Nancy,
I
yeah,
also think we should maybe consult with Save Our Heritage, and I'd be happy to do that. I mean, just to get their ideas and see if they have any more before pictures.
okay, yeah,
or
because
historical
again,
pictures.
they really were not, they were, I think, dumbfounded by this thing, because they had,
Yeah,
you know, and at good faith, they wrote the beautiful letter to us asking us to support this variance. Anyway, I think I have to go. I'm sorry. I hope, you know,
I
it's
move
hard when
we
you're,
adjourn.
yes, would you please?
We do have
I-
minutes.
I move we adjourn.
Oh,
Well, we do have minutes to do.
we could defer.
I just have Nancy.
They're
They're
and-
just drafts.
If no one's read them, you can defer to your next
Oh.
meeting.
I didn't
I
have a
read-
chance to.
Have others read them?
I did just one quick thing. You called the meeting to order at 7, not 7:30. Just a quick
Oh, okay.
minor note, but other than that, I did read them and they looked fine.
So do I have a motion to approve the minutes with the exception of the change to 7 as opposed to 7:30 start?
Yep.
Thank you. Second, Bob.
Second.
All in favor? Ellen?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Rebecca?
I
Nancy? Me? Yes.
So your next meeting is, you don't have a meeting scheduled in December. So unless like a demolition review application comes in and I have to schedule something, you won't be meeting again until January 14th. And I am drafting your 2021 meeting schedule. And so I will email that out to you guys.
Thank you.
thank you.
You,
I move
Thanks,
we adjourn.
everybody.
are
Thank
we
you
ever
very
gonna
much,
see you
Heather.
again, Heather?
So
Bye,
I'll see
Susan.
you guys in March.
Look,
Are we
Heather.
gonna see you again?
Congratulations.
Hey,
Congratulations.
everyone.
Who motioned to adjourn?
Oh, Bob did. I second it.
You can't
All in
second.
favor?
I second it.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All right,
Good night.
see
Thank you
everyone
so
in
much.
March.
Okay, goodbye, dog.
Bye.
Heather.
Aye.
Thank you.
Bye.